Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 14 of 28 days to master level chess tactics. Today, I'm going to give you an intermediate puzzle. This was a game that was played in 1980 by Gligoric as white versus Andrus Adorjan. Now, this game is very interesting because it gives you an opportunity to see how you would calculate an attack, and it's Valentine's Day today, so happy Valentine's Day. And I'm going to show you how to accomplish a demolition of pawn structure. All right, so let's get into this position. It's white to move, and you can pause the video now. Now, it's actually a very apt day to cover demolition of pawn structure, because of course, when you're trying to get to know your Valentine, you want to break down the defense. you want to accomplish the goal of achieving your objective. All right, so let's just get into this position. All right, so as white, you can see that if you have any intuition at all, the first move would be bishop takes on h7. Launching into kind of a classic bishop sacrifice, a Greek sacrifice, as they call it, giving up your bishop and opening up lines. And you can see that the king is sitting here with these three pawns, and it's roughly equal with material, but it's also roughly equal with position too, with these bishops in the center, and white just has a slightly faster attack. Now, the interesting thing about this game is that Gligoric actually drew this game, even though he played all the right moves for a long time. So let's get into it. So it does start with bishop takes h7 check. The queen comes in, and now notice that these basic tactics don't necessarily work. So let's say that you do bishop takes h7, the king takes. Now you cannot just capture this bishop on a d5 because actually black has a sudden check as well. So always look for the forcing replies of your opponent, because sometimes you can get caught in your own ideas, and that'll lead to you making a very sudden blunder, a very common mistake. Now, these very complicated attacks are underpinned by otherwise basic tactics. All right, so how do you proceed from here? So queen to h5, and now rook to h3. It looks like there's, or at least it looks like white is very active. It's very hard to stop this attack. There is f5, and then queen to h7, check. And now notice the king goes to e8, sitting in the center, and the basic tactics still work. The queen cannot take on d5 because a bishop takes h2 check. Now here's where Gligoric goes wrong. Now the king is stuck in the center. I'm trying to hide the moves here with this, but rook to e3, bishop back, and the queen is protecting this bishop. So it looks like white essentially gave away a piece for a strong attack. He does have two pawns for a piece, queen here. And now this is the main point that I want to cover in this position. So if you calculated bishop takes h7 and these moves here with f5 as a defense, you might end up here. And this is where you need to focus on increasing your activity. So Gligoric chose bishop to d2, which is actually a mistake. It's a little too slow. His idea is bishop to d2 and then something like bishop to b4, bringing the rook in. Now, in this position as white with the attack, his main idea is to increase the rest of his piece's activity. All right, so from this position, this is actually the most interesting position that I found from this tactic, because the main idea, and actually the wrong idea that Gligoric had, was to develop the bishop. So his main problem in this position is he has to get the rook and the bishop out, and he chose bishop to d2, doubling the rooks, and then trying to play something like bishop to b4. Now, the actual correct, and I want to make a note that in this position, Gligoric actually drew as white. So when you're trying to attack and demolish the pawn structure, you actually have to find the most accurate way in a lot of positions to attack. So the correct position, or the correct move in this position, I'd like you to pause it if you want to take a moment to think about it right now. But basically, rook to e5, and the whole point of that is that bishop to g5 and then rook to e1 eventually wins back a piece with white having a two-pawn advantage. Now, I'll leave you to calculate the rest of these lines. There's many of them. I'll leave a position in the bottom. There's just so many lines. Like, there's at least 3 to 5 lines that you could look at. And that's where I'm going to leave the rest of this course, where just complicated positions that you can analyze yourself, because it looks like a lot of people from this course, they're not necessarily looking at all the lines, and that's fine, but I just want to cover main points in the position that I don't think necessarily you'd get from computer lines. And this position here is a perfect example, because the Encyclopedia of Combinations actually left me kind of in the lurch trying to figure out the end of this position, which is actually, this is where they get, this is what they gave. And in the real game that I looked up of Gligoric versus Adorjan, then white actually drew, and I thought, so they're giving a winning combination in a position that white actually drew against an elite grandmaster that I'm supposed to solve? Like, that, to me, that was completely crazy. But I find that it's still helpful to study these positions, because the initial position, if we go back here, all right, let's go back here to get here with bishop takes h7. You see that even a grandmaster has this idea, but a couple moves later with the checks, with the threats, it looks like he still can't take on d5. Then he's played these moves, and he sits here and thinks after queen check, the rook blocks, and now obviously rook to a7 comes in, and it looks like he's all defended. So how do you activate your pieces from this position? Now, I feel like if Gligoric would have asked himself that idea, then he would have found rook to e5 and bishop to g5. And there's a lot of ideas. If the king tries to run away, you can play queen to h7, threatening checkmate. You can bring the rook from a to e1, and eventually you could win a bishop, even from rook to a to d1, pinning the bishop. There's just a lot of ideas in this position, and it's not necessarily a tactical thing, calculation thing. It's more asking yourself, how do I apply these basic ideas in a complicated way? And I'm not trying to say that I would have found that in the game, but I do feel like trying to apply that in a tactical puzzle would have been very helpful from any position, really. All right, so this is going to conclude day 14 of 28 Days to Master Level Chess Tactics. Happy Valentine's Day. I'm thinking about starting to do live streams for these positions, just to kind of get into live analysis and just going through it with players that are there. And just leave a comment, and I'll see you in the future. Don't fret if you got the solution wrong. There will be another time.